Hello, everybody. Welcome to a series of dialogues on global history. In the field of global history studies, the positionality is very important. At which position, for whom historians try to describe their interpretation, there is a very difficult issue and very important issue for historians working in the field of global history. They need to be conscious of this issue always. And today we will discuss this issue by taking a Russian case as an example. Marc Elie, Professor Marc Elie, who is the vice director of CERSEC, that is Centre d'études du monde russe, caucasien et centre européen, that is an English research center of Russian, Caucasian, and Central European world. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yes, yeah. Entirely. Yeah. Very well pronounced in French.
So he's a vice director of this center and expert of environmental history of the Soviet Union. And also he's the French representative of Global History Collaborative, for which we are now working together. That is an international network of global history studies. And we have Maria Telegina at Tokyo College, who is a postdoc researcher at Tokyo College, and she's not an expert of history. She's an expert of cognitive linguistics, but she's a Russian researcher. So I expect her to add some her personal information to our discussion today. And Maria will ask several questions to Marc. Please start, Maria.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and Marc, thank you very much for participating in this dialogue. And first of all, I would like to ask you a question about your field of research in relation to global history. So you're working in the field of environmental and social science history in the USSR. So what has led you to this fascinating but very specific topic, and what is the relevance of global history in relation to your field of research?
Thank you, Maria, for this question. I want to thank Professor Haneda and Tokyo College, and you, Maria, as well, for inviting me and to this dialogue. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm very honored to answer these questions. So on your question of what is global about my studies of sciences in the Soviet Union and of the steppe history of the Soviet Union, the history of wheat production in the northern steppes of Kazakhstan, which is my main topic. So what is for me fascinating about these steppes is that this is basically a colonial periphery of the Russian and then Soviet empires. It's very distant from any major urban centers. It is landlocked in one of the most tightly closed countries in the world, the Soviet Union. But at the same time, it is, as everything else, linked to global trends. And one of them that I'm studying in the field of agricultural history and environmental history is the introduction of soil conservation farming in the 20th century. Our colleague David Moon has shown how people and plants were exchanged between North America and Russia, Ukraine. So between the Great Plains of North America and Ukrainian and Russian steppes in the 19th century when settlers from the Russian Empire moved to the Great Plains of North America. I show that these contacts did not disappear under Soviet power, but took new forms, that of technical and scientific exchange between Kazakhstani agronomists and their colleagues in Canada, in Saskatchewan and Alberta mainly. So Canadians had developed anti-erosion measures to cope with the Dust Bowl of the 1930s. When a similar wave of dust storms struck the steppes of Kazakhstan 30 years later, in the 1960s, the Soviet agronomists retro-engineered and copied Canadian soil erosion plows and machinery. What is more, in the midst of the Cold War, the Soviet agronomists, Kazakhstani agronomists, imported from the capitalist Canadian farmers a set of measures to fight soil erosion, which they adapted to the soil and weather, and more importantly, to the socioeconomic conditions of collectivized agriculture. So whereas in the 19th century, settlers moved from the Eurasian steppes to the prairies of North America with their seeds, a century later, in the mid-1960s, Canadians exported farming techniques back to the Soviet steppes to control erosion.
So this is, as far as I understood, the relation of the USSR history with the global history in your field. But I was wondering what might have changed in the approaches of historians or in the framework, major narrative of world history, global history, when the USSR collapsed and when a new country, Russia, appeared. How this transition happened, but if it happened, was it smooth? Or is it a single narrative? Do we have some contradicting voices? What is happening in this context in contemporary Russia? I'm sorry for many questions, but I'm really curious about it.
Thank you, Maria, for this question. So until the end of the 1980s, Marxist-Leninist or Soviet historiography understood world history as the process of social transformation going from feudalism to communism via several stages. It assumed a clear, linear historical development. Countries sit at one of these stages and progress toward revolution, socialism, and communism. One country had a special position in this setting, Soviet Russia, as the leader of world revolution. The world revolution did not occur, as we know, so socialism was built in one country, which was a big and very diverse country. After World War II, the socialist camp grew both by revolutions, by war, and by decolonization. Communist China, many the communist countries of Eastern Europe, and so on. And the idea was that capitalist countries remain on the brink of revolution and would eventually be transformed into socialist societies. So this ideological framework remained in place until the late 1980s, although it did not constrain equally all and every historical study. So when the Soviet Union fell apart and this ideology disappeared, the main changes in historiography occurred in the field of Russian history, not of world history. So Russian history was revolutionized by the fall of the Soviet Union, but not so much world history. In Russia, before the revolution and after the revolution, history was separated into two fields. So you had Russian history, which is called patriotic history, Отечественная история, and then you had world history, мировая история, всеобщая история. And these were two separated fields. And
excuse me, Russian history is included in world history or completely separated?
It is separated. Traditionally, it is separated. Yeah.
Right.
Traditionally, it's separated. In the Academy of Sciences, you have two institutes, at least two main institutes for history. You have the Institute of Russian History, and you have the Institute of Universal or World History. Those are two different institutions. And during your curriculum at university, those are fields that are separated. So, and the main changes occurred in the field of Russian history because of the opening up of the archives. During the first decade after the fall of the Soviet Union and until now, Russian historians read a lot of foreign literature that was previously banned or difficult to find. And so they absorbed an enormous quantity of theoretical and methodological works in the field of history, anthropology, and French theory, Alltagsgeschichte, Begriffsgeschichte, a lot of different approaches of history. But one thing is that as far as global history is concerned, Russian historians, and here I mean not only Russian historians from Russia, but Russianists, people like me, for instance, have been reluctant or slow to come to global history. And why is so? It needs an explanation for that. So Alessandro Stanziani explained that, saying that the idea that Russia is an exception in the process of modernization is still a very living conception. It's still very widespread. So we still handle Russian history as being a question of backwardness or modernization, of being a question of belonging to Europe, of belonging to Asia, the question of nations or empires, and these frameworks constrain constrain the view of Russian history, and I think they are an obstacle. And Alessandro said that very well. They are an obstacle to decenter the view on Russia, to stop seeing Russia as trying to catch up with the West. So the main vector of global history in Russian studies today is what is called new imperial history. In Russia, this trend is represented, for instance, by Alexander Semyonov at the High School of Economics, and by the journal Ab Imperio, a bilingual English-Russian, highly influential quarterly. So new imperial history seeks to go beyond the nation-centered framework and beyond both the Russia-centric and equally the non-Russian-centric nationalism, ethnic, if you want, ethnocentric nationalism. So they try to go beyond ethnic histories. They have translated into Russian the book of our colleague Sebastian Conrad, his introduction into global history, which is called «Что такое глобальная история» in Russian, 2 years ago. And so there is this field very active of what is called in what we call Russianists, we call nationality studies. So study of empires and ethnic minorities, how they interact. And the vanguard of this trend is this journal Ab Imperio, which was funded in Kazan in 2000, but is now mostly an international journal. And his editors, his main editors, have moved from Kazan to North America. So this is the main trend probably. But then you have other schools of thought of what could be global history. So you have I will quote two of them. So you have the Institute of World History, Institut всеобщей истории, which still exists and with a lot of people working in the field of area studies within it, and some of them trying to understand processes of globalization and global integration. And then you have another trend which has roots in the Soviet times, which is called globalistika in Russian. So though there are people who are engaged in understanding the process of globalization. So not all of them are historians, but quite a few are. And this view is that global is not only something that happens between countries and individuals, but that's something that happens between different elements of the living world, between humans and ecological problems, for instance. So this global as integrating not only social history, but integrating environmental history, ecological concerns. So I would, these two, I would say, a part of new imperial history, you have these two trends. So the old world history is still alive, and this relatively new thing, which is called globalistika.
Thank you. But I wonder how, for example, globalistika or this Institute of World History, how the studies, how the research is embedded in the context of international history studies. Are there fundamental differences between approaches of this, as far as I understood, post-Soviet researchers and European academics in the field of Soviet Russia history?
So I would say, as far as Russian history is concerned, history of Russia, the field is entirely integrated. So we Russianists and foreign Russianists write in the same journals. They apply for the same grants. They study in the same in the same master's program. So this is and a field is entirely integrated.
This is conducted. The study is conducted in Russian. Or in which language?
This is mainly done in two languages, Russian and English. Yeah, so a lot of international journals are bilingual. So not a lot, but some of them are bilingual, like Ab Imperio, Cahiers du Monde Russe are bilingual journals. So you can publish there in English and Russian. But the language is an issue. The language is an issue because it prevents many Russian historians to access these international journals, because there is this language barrier. You need to know English to do that. So that's still an issue. You have several specialist journals that accept Russian papers, but if you go into the big history journals, they accept papers in English only.
I see. So there is a language problem, right?
There still is, yeah. But I don't think it's different from the language problem you have in France or in Germany, for that matter. I don't think that Russia stands apart here. It's exactly the same as for any country which language is in which English is not the native language.
Yeah, in Japan as well.
In Japan as well, I guess. Yeah. So that's not a specifically Russian problem.
Well, but language apart, is influence of European context in the field of Eurocentrism a relevant issue in Russian historiography?
I would say Eurocentrism is an issue, yes, in Russian historiography, as it is for instance, in French historiography as well, as far as I know. Because in Russia, if the question of whether the Russian and then the Soviet empires were colonial empires is still debated. That's the first thing, and you would find quite a few historians, Russian historians, who would contest that Russia is a European country. So how can you speak of Eurocentrism if it's not a European country and it's not a colonial empire? So, but we try to deconstruct not only Eurocentrism but any kind of ethnocentrism, right? So the history of imperial Russia came into a new phase after the fall of the Soviet Union, what I call the new imperial history. But the insights from post-colonial studies have been slow to penetrate the field of imperial studies, not new imperial studies, but at large, people working on imperial Russia and the Soviet Union do not quite often pick up these ideas of post-colonial studies. So you see that in the idea of internal colonization, which is still strong in Russian history today. So the idea is that of Vasily Kluchevsky, a key historian of the 19th century, which said that Russians colonized themselves, their own territory, their own people. So Russian peasants were both colonizers and the colonized.
Thank you, Marc. Thank you, Marc. Yeah. And the time is now running up, and unfortunately, I can't listen to Maria's own experience of the study on history at her primary school, for example. And we need to prepare another session on Russian historiography or history, discussing on historical studies in Russia, especially that of global history. Thank you very much, Marc and Maria. And let's keep in touch.
Thank you very much.
Certainly, I hope we will have another opportunity to discuss this very important issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Masashi. Thank you, Maria, for
Bye-bye.
your invitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.